The next item of business is a statement by Michael Russell on Brexit readiness. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of his statement, so there will be no interventions or interruptions. I call on Michael Russell, Cabinet Secretary, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, it is utterly incredible that some 1,629 days since the EU referendum, I should rise to make a statement on the final details of withdrawal with still no clarity about how the UK will trade with the EU in just 23 days' time. The one thing we do know, however, is that the choice remains, as it has been since the extremists finally took over the Tory party and the UK government, between a no deal and a low deal. And either of those will be damaging and harmful. Damaging and harmful to all sectors of the Scottish economy, damaging and harmful to every community in Scotland, and indeed damaging and harmful to every Scottish citizen. Of course, Scotland did not vote to leave the EU, and the issue of how we rejoin as an independent member state is very live. That option of independence is now the majority choice, not just of this chamber, but of the people of Scotland in the last 15 opinion polls. But that is for another day. What we need to do now is to find a way to mitigate, as much as we are able, though we will not be able to do so completely, the damaging and harmful consequences of the UK government's ineptitude and ideological obsession with a past that never was, a mythical past that is corroding any prospect of a prosperous future. Of course, to add insult to injury, the irresponsible refusal by the UK government during the summer to extend the transition period means that our exit from it could not come at a more challenging time. The concurrent challenges of dealing with the end of transition, the impacts of COVID-19 and the normal winter pressures means that our public services, businesses and communities will be stretched in a way that has never been experienced before. That is now simply a fact. This is why the Scottish Government is putting in place a comprehensive set of arrangements based on our existing and well-established resilience processes. We will use these arrangements to oversee and manage our response as best we can to the concurrent challenges together with a wide range of partners. So, Presiding Officer, yesterday the Scottish Government Resilience Room for these concurrent risks was activated on a 7-day-a-week basis, and the phased stand-up of the National Coordination Centre and the single Scotland-wide multi-agency coordination centre, MAC, was commenced. The MAC is led by Police Scotland as part of the national coordination structure and works with national and local partners such as the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, Scottish Ambulance Service, SEPA, Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, local authorities and health boards, and through the local resilience partnerships. All these arrangements will build over the next 4 weeks and will include ministerial oversight through a winter preparedness group convened by the Deputy First Minister, which has been meeting for some time. Meetings of a smaller ministerial group will start shortly and will become daily after Christmas. These arrangements will go to 24 hours a day operation in the last week of the month and will remain at that level for as long as they are required. The Scottish Government has, of course, been working with the UK Government to scope and exercise the arrangements and scenarios that exist. Attendance at the UK Government EXO meetings is, for the devolved administrations, by invitation only, but did occur 3 times last week. After a long period in which there was limited sharing of the information needed for us to liaise effectively and ensure all our plans were complementary with the other administrations, I'm glad to say that that problem appears to have eased. Last week we secured access to the daily dashboard and will be feeding into it. Presiding Officer, we should be mindful of the fact that all those in the front line of our public services have been working at full tilt or beyond since the start of the pandemic. What is happening now will put a further strain upon them, which was another good reason for the UK to have accepted the extension of transition which was on offer this summer. I must express my own concern for all those staff, and I have raised this at UK level as well. But let me dig down a little deeper into the actual areas of activity. Along with standing up our emergency response structures, the Scottish Government has intensified preparations across the board. We're prioritising substantial work around key themes of protecting people, protecting imports and exports of essential goods, minimising economic impact and ensuring necessary legislative changes. As ever, it will be those who can afford it least who will be hit hardest. We know there is a risk that households already struggling financially will find life even harder after EU exit, with increasing inequalities and a greater demand on local government and the third sector. That is why, at the end of November, the First Minister announced a £100 million package of measures to support vulnerable people, communities in the third sector, to help those on low incomes, children and people at risk of homelessness or social isolation, cope with economic impact of Brexit, coronavirus and the winter weather. Work to ensure the money goes where it is needed is well underway, led by my colleague, the Cabinet Secretary for Communities. We're also aware that the security of international supply chains have never been so important. So we have launched a new £5 million fund to help Scottish wholesale food and drink businesses, many of which have been affected by COVID-19, to help support food supplies across the country, and especially into our hospitals, care homes, schools and prisons. The Cabinet Secretary for the Rural Economy and Tourism is maintaining the effective liaison with the retail sector that he undertook at the start of the first lockdown and had put in place for earlier no-deal preparations. We are particularly sensitive to issues arising at the end of food chains, many of which terminate in rural Scotland, even though they start at the short straits. Food Standards Scotland is a key partner in that activity. Working with the other administrations, we're doing all we can to make sure that patients get the medicines and other medical supplies needed and to ensure the continuity of those supplies. Additional freight capacity has been contracted to ensure the most critical goods can reach the UK mainland without interruption. Pharmaceutical companies have been building up stocks of medicines to mitigate for potential disruption at ports. In addition to those arrangements, and in response to lessons learned from the first wave of COVID-19, we're building a stockpile of around 60 critical care, ICU, and supportive care end-of-life medicines, as well as supplies of COVID-19 treatments. We have arrangements in place for managing potential shortages, including the Scottish Medicines Shortages Response Group, which is clinically led. We will also be making use of new IT reporting tools to gather real-time data on medicine stock holding and stock usage in hospitals. Within Scotland, medical devices and clinical consumable supply issues are being managed by the NSS's National Procurement Arm, which is building up stock of main items at the National Distribution Centre. 88% of products are already at the target of 6 weeks or above, with remaining items expected by mid-December. Now, the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Sport is fully engaged in ensuring these actions are taking place, even though she is also fully engaged in the response to the pandemic. And I want to pay tribute for her extraordinary commitment and resilience, given the demands on her. Scotland benefits enormously from the contributions made by EU citizens who work within the health and social care sectors, as well as other sectors, and to lose them would be disastrous for all of us. EU citizens currently resident and working in Scotland have the right to remain under the withdrawal agreement. We encourage all such EU citizens to apply to the Home Office Settled Status Scheme to exercise this right. We understand that businesses across Scotland have been put under immense strain over the past year, and that many are struggling with the prospect of dealing with the great complexities EU exit will bring. The Cabinet Secretary for the Economy, Fair Work and Culture is therefore implementing a wide range of measures to support businesses across all sectors of the Scottish economy. The Building Resilience Steering Group provides strategic leadership and coordination across our enterprise agencies to ensure effective delivery of the joint EU exit and COVID-19 response for Scottish businesses. Our enterprise agencies have developed mechanisms to identify companies that we anticipate will encounter operational and financial challenges as a result of both EU exit and COVID-19, and are proactively contacting 500 such companies to provide targeted advice and guidance. In addition, our multi-agency Prepare for Brexit website, hosted by Scottish Enterprise, provides advice, sources of financial support, and online self-assessment toolkits. Enterprise agencies are also working jointly with the UK Government on its Field Force programme to provide advice to business. We're working with seafood exporters, Scottish local authorities and logistic companies to provide an export health certificate signing service at a number of existing logistics hubs in central Scotland. In addition to relieving some of the growing Brexit and COVID burden on local authority environmental health departments, this approach, which relies on a risk-based approach to certification, will also provide improved access to those certificates for our exporters. And we will continue all this work throughout the end process of the transition period and beyond, but the stark truth is that we simply cannot avert every negative outcome. All sectors of society must also now do what they can to prepare by using the resources and support we have put in place. Finally, Presiding Officer, there will be an increased legislative burden arising from the current situation. This chamber will have to be ready to meet that challenge. First of all, in looking at the request for a legislative consent motion for any bills that the UK Government finds it necessary to introduce in the coming days. That issue is being considered by the Minister for Parliamentary Business, who will be consulting the Parliamentary Bureau. Presiding Officer, it is with profound and deep regret that we find ourselves in this position of uncertainty. In the midst of a pandemic and the worst economic recession in our lifetimes, Scotland is having to cope with the end of the transition period. The UK government has pressed ahead with its own hardline negotiating position, refusing to listen to Scotland's voice, and this catastrophic situation must be entirely owned by the ultra-Brexiteers who have taken over the Conservative Party. We were told in 2014 not to leave, but to lead. What has happened is that we've been led, but not into a more equal relationship, but into a cul-de-sac of insularity and insecurity. Scotland didn't vote for any of this. We must now do our best to help our fellow citizens through it, but we must also redouble our efforts to give the people of Scotland a choice to leave this chaos behind.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Now, I have 20 minutes and no more. There's no spare time for members to ask questions. We can ask members who wish to ask a question to press the request to speak button. Can I ask for them please to be succinct, and also I please the Cabinet Secretary to do the same, and particularly those who are working remotely, because it's more difficult for you to realise you're going beyond your time. Right, the first person I call is Dean Lockhart, followed by Anna Sarwar.
Thank you, and I thank the Cabinet Secretary for an advance copy of his statement. Presiding Officer, negotiations continue with the EU, and I remain hopeful that a deal can be reached. In the past few hours alone, it has been announced that agreement has been reached in relation to the protocol governing Ireland and Northern Ireland, something which I noticed the Cabinet Secretary did not welcome. In terms of preparedness for Brexit, committees of this Parliament have heard that large parts of the Scottish economy are ready for Brexit. The financial services sector has taken all the necessary steps to be ready. The farming sector is looking forward to shaping agricultural policy for the needs of Scottish farmers, and Scotland's fishing communities want to secure access to our seas. And we're now in a position where the majority of EU free trade agreements with third countries have been rolled over. And, Presiding Officer, all of this is despite, not because of the efforts of the SNP, because the SNP want to return to the Common Agricultural Policy, return to the Common Fisheries Policy, and the SNP has failed to support every single trade deal in the past 15 years, including free trade agreements with Canada, Japan, Singapore and South Korea. So let me ask the Cabinet Secretary, first, is it indeed his policy to force fishing communities to return to the Common Fisheries Policy, amended or otherwise? Is it his policy to return Scottish farming to the Common Agricultural Policy, reformed or otherwise? And third, can he explain why the SNP has failed to support every single trade deal over the past 15 years? Is it because deep down the reality is that the SNP is an anti-trade party? And is that the real reason why? Is that the real reason why the Cabinet Secretary has refused
please,
to
when
support
I say stop, stop.
any
sit down.
deal
No,
with
sit
the
down.
EU?
Yeah, you're 1 minute 30 seconds. Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. That was a merciful ending. I have to say that Dean Lockhart should astonish everybody in this chamber that is the response 23 days before we leave the EU, which, however we leave, will be damaging and harmful when the farming sector, for example, in my constituency, and I am a constituency member, in my constituency, is looking at for example, the sheep trade and the lamb trade and facing ruin. That is the response of the Scottish Conservative Party. It is utterly shameful. No, this SNP is not anti-trade. What we are is pro-Scotland. And if we had a Conservative Party that was doing that, we wouldn't be in this mess.
Anna Sarwar, followed by Annabel Ewing.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for advance sight of the statement. Can I say right from the outset that I share the Cabinet Secretary's frustration and, frankly, anger. This is a mess of Boris Johnson and the Tories' own making. And that this is happening in the midst of a global pandemic, when thousands have lost their lives, and with lives and livelihoods still at risk, it is completely unforgivable. At this late stage, we still need to avoid a no deal, but I accept that any deal will still be far from ideal. But does the Cabinet Secretary accept that our collective focus must be on our COVID recovery, not two governments focused on their ideological obsessions, together bringing our people together, rebuilding our economy, protecting and creating jobs, fixing our education system and delivering an NHS that never again has to choose between treating a virus or treating cancer? That should be our collective national mission.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm glad that Anas Sarwar agrees that this is a complete Tory mess, and I hope he will continue to oppose that Tory mess. Undoubtedly, a deal of some sort is better than no deal, but both are going to be very bad. Whatever one is chosen will be very bad. There is no doubt about that, and that is the result of Tory ideology and Tory incompetence. And you may take your pick, which is more damaging. I certainly also accept that rebuilding is absolutely essential after the pandemic. And that actually, and it's wrong to talk about advantages, but actually there are things that we should be talking about doing and are talking about doing which make a better society, a much better society. We should be focused on the green recovery. We should be focused on that phrase that is much used across Europe, much abused by the UK government, but much used across Europe on building back better. But the key issue there, of course, who would you trust to build back better? And that is actually the problem that Mr Sarwar must face. Would you trust a Tory government at Westminster to build back better, or would you trust Scotland to make the choices? I know what I would choose: Scotland to make the choices to build a better country and a better society.
I have 11 questioners and I've got about 11 minutes, so that's the warning. I call Annabel Ewing, followed by Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Whether we see a UK government very, very bad no deal or a UK government very, very bad deal, significant concerns have been raised about the additional burdens that will be involved in transporting premium Scottish products like salmon, like beef and like lamb to market. Does the Cabinet Secretary share these concerns, and has he received any assurance whatsoever from the UK Prime Minister, Boris Johnson?
Cabinet Secretary.
No, I have not, and I do share those assurances. The assurances we need apply to not just seamless trade, but they apply to a lack of bureaucracy at the border. Whatever happens, even if there are not tariffs, there's going to be a major increase in bureaucracy at the border. I would refer the member to Jamie McMillan in Lochfine Langoustines and the way in which he has illustrated this recently by just demonstrating on Twitter the amount of paper he's going to have to deal with.
Murdo Fraser, followed by Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The UK Government has given the Scottish Government some £214 million in Barnett consequentials, plus an additional £20 million to deal with Brexit preparedness, making a total of £234 million. Has every penny of this been spent on preparing Scotland for Brexit, and when are we going to see a full accounting?
Cabinet Secretary.
We have undoubtedly got money which we've given to the Treasury, and we keep giving money to the Treasury, and we've undoubtedly had some money back. But I think the full accounting for that money, when it is shown, will illustrate, for example, that the promises that were made to the Scottish Government and to the Scottish people, promises that were made about no detriment, have been utterly false. And what this will do is will cost each one of us vastly more than anything the Treasury has given back. Vastly more.
Kenneth Gibson, followed by Ross Greer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. 3 weeks ago, I asked about the impact of Brexit on road haulage and logistics, described as a shambles, incomprehensible, nonsense from the start, sleepwalking to disaster and bonkers from the UK Tory government's chaotic handling of arrangements. Cabinet Secretary, are we any nearer to seeing a resolution, given the critical importance of this sector, which employs 2.54 million people in the UK and on which we all depend for goods and services?
Cabinet
I
Secretary.
do think it is immensely illustrative that the two Conservative questions we've had so far have all been attacks rather than looking at the actual facts that, for example, the Road Haulage Association has given evidence to this committee, to this Parliament about, in which they pointed out it is shambolic. We've seen road hauliers say that they actually not only don't know how they are going to operate, but they fear that hauliers coming in from the continent will not come in because they are so concerned about these problems. Those are facts. But all we've had from the Conservatives is propaganda, and it's propaganda to disguise the fact that this is an appalling thing foisted on Scotland and we did not vote for it. That fact alone needs to be repeated every single day so that people of Scotland understand what damage is being done by the Conservatives and their friends or masters south of the border.
Ross Greer, followed by Willie Rennie.
Thank you. At present, to verify that an EU citizen has settled status, those such as banks and landlords can access a UK government web portal. Many EU citizens are concerned that this system and the lack of a physical token of their status will exclude the most vulnerable for a variety of reasons and result in instances of discrimination. Assuming that the Scottish Government can access this portal, will the Cabinet Secretary consider operating an on-demand service whereby the government provides EU citizens with settled status with a letter, a certificate or some other physical token of this status?
Cabinet Secretary.
It's a really important point. I'm very glad that Ross Greer has raised it with me. We have considered that on a number of occasions, but there are real difficulties in doing so because of the recognition that that might give, or the artificial recognition that might give, and some people may not apply for it or may not have it. The right thing to have happened here was to give physical proof of the fact that people had settled status, and we should continue to argue very strongly for that to be put in place. The UK government has stepped back from illegality today. According to Dean Lockett, I should be celebrating that and dancing in the streets. But it has not stepped back from its poor, indeed shameful, way in which it is treating EU citizens.
Willie Rennie, followed by Gillian Martin.
We're told that Brexit was over, but the pain just goes on and on. But as the Minister raised independence, can I say gently to him that I can't imagine that breaking from the United Kingdom will be any less painful than this. So can I ask the Minister, and what specific emergency measures is he most concerned about amongst a long list that he's provided to us this afternoon?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm grateful for the First Minister, for the leader. We're both getting it wrong here. So maybe there's something in the air today that is misleading both of us. In terms of I'm glad that the member recognised the range of things that are underway, and they are comprehensive. I don't want to single out ones in which I would be particularly concerned. But there are issues such as business preparedness, which are not in the gift of the government. We can encourage people to be prepared. We can go out and talk to people. We can tell people what is available. And indeed, I indicated that the enterprise companies have been doing that. But business preparedness also relies on businesses themselves. And of course, many businesses, it's not their fault. Many businesses have been so preoccupied with COVID, that it's been difficult for them to move forward in this. And I've heard that argument several times. Can I simply say that I know Mr. Rennie is a man who likes detail. I would encourage him to imagine a better future, because that better future is independence.
Gillian Martin, followed by Polly McNeill.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, I'm really concerned about what this means for our farmers. About a third of Scottish lamb goes for export, 98% of that is to the EU. What in essence is the forecasted cost and effect of both the low deal being negotiated or a no deal to Scottish sheep farmers once this transition period has ended? And what implications are there for food processors more generally for the lorry queues expected for customs checking cargo at ports?
Cabinet Secretary.
I share the member's concern. I mean, of course, in a no deal, then food exporters would be faced with tariffs and would be faced with, in the case of lamb, for example, pretty ruinous tariffs. And it would certainly make Scottish hill farming uneconomic. I mean, there's no doubt about that. In terms of a low deal, then the real difficulty here is the actual act of exporting and the additional costs that will come from additional paperwork, requiring, for example, to have somebody undertake this task for you. And customs agents, simply you could not get one for a lot of money now because they are so busy with things. So the real problem there will be making it much, much more difficult. If it is more difficult, also, people will be more reluctant to buy because they're not going to go through and jump through lots of hoops to buy. So in these circumstances, both sets of problems are going to be concerning. We are trying to provide as much support as we possibly can, and I know Fergus Ewing is working very hard with the agricultural sector and with the fishing sector to try and help. And the environmental health officers issue, which I mentioned, is important because reducing the bureaucracy as much as we can is important, but it will not be possible to reduce it. And that also shows the problem of concurrent risk, because environmental health officers are under a lot of pressure now to assist, for example, with inspection of premises for COVID. So the demands upon people are very great, and there simply aren't enough of them. So trying to change the system has been difficult. We've made some progress, but this is not going to be easy over the next few months.
Polly McNeill, followed by Maureen Ward.
Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that the admission by the UK Environment Minister that a modest increase in food prices will happen exposes the blasé approach of the Tories to the impact of ordinary people on rising food costs? How can the Scottish Government help to mitigate the cost of food to ordinary people?
Cabinet Secretary.
I do accept that, and indeed it illustrates again the two Conservative questions we've had so far have even refused to accept or acknowledge the fact that the UK Government has accepted that there will be an increase in prices. Now, when the UK government says something is modest in terms of a price increase, then I have to say that I'm not inclined to believe them. There will be difficulties in there, and they have also admitted there will be difficulties in supply. The UK government has argued that there won't be a shortage of food, but there will be difficulties in certain items, and that will also affect poorer families very greatly, because many of those items will be affected. I think we will do our very best, first of all, to guarantee support for the supply chains, because there are issues in there. Secondly, as I indicated, we've made monies available for the third sector and for other bodies, and some of that clearly will go to help food resilience in communities. But we must also say to people that they must be saying, as the member is saying openly, this is unacceptable. Because it is the poorest, those who are furthest from society, who will suffer most greatly. Now, that is the result of a deliberate Conservative policy, and we have to make that clear. That is where the problem is coming from, and that is the thing that we have to resolve.
Maureen Watt, followed by Liz Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that no politician who opposes Brexit could vote for any deal that the UK Government brings forward, because to do so would be to give our consent to an outcome that Scotland didn't vote for, and that will do untold damage to our country?
Cabinet Secretary, briefly,
I
please.
cannot imagine, given the circumstances that we've had, that any politician who finds Brexit as unacceptable, as clearly we do and many others do, would vote in its favour. It is absolutely no argument to say, well, you better just do it to get it over and done with. We've seen that argument far too often. It is interesting to note that polling evidence would suggest that now there is a considerable majority of people against Brexit. And yet the Tories at UK level and at Scottish level are continuing to pursue it as if it was the will of the majority. It is not the will of the majority. And any sensible government would have stepped back from this complete nonsense a long time ago. Unfortunately, we do not have a sensible government.
Liz Smith, followed by Stuart McMillan. I'll take the next person and I'll come to you. Can't shout. It won't be on the OR. If you do that, you'll have to move somewhere. I'll take Stuart McMillan now, please, if I may, if he's ready. Is he? Stuart McMillan, please.
Okay, thank you. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm what additional resource has been provided with the Scottish Government and also the port authorities from the UK Government to assist with the shipping of goods to and from Scottish ports?
Cabinet Secretary.
Although there has been a lot of discussion about additional monies for ports, we've not seen any as yet coming into Scotland from the UK Government. There is the difficult problem of Cairn Ryan, which today's interim agreement on the protocol may assist, though I have not yet heard whether it actually will assist that. The reality of this situation as it develops is that the promise of no detriment, the argument that monies would be provided, has simply been false. And a detriment is occurring in almost every area, and we're seeing it emerging in almost every area. And it will be one of the most serious outcomes of this, that in actual fact there will be less money coming to Scotland. And given the scale, for example, of investment from programmes such as Erasmus+, then I think there's going to be a very rude awakening to the financial cost of what is taking place.
Liz Smith, followed by Claire Baker.
Thank you. Could the Cabinet Secretary confirm that when it comes to food standards, which he mentioned in his speech, that in the recent few weeks there has actually been very good progress between the UK and the Scottish governments, given that food standards obviously, when it comes to the export and import side of things, is a reserved matter and the rest of it is devolved. There has been good progress. Would you acknowledge that?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm not sure to what the member is referring. I mean, if she's referring to the Internal Market Bill, there's been appalling lack of progress, because what is going to happen is that any standards that this chamber sets can be fatally undermined by the UK government. So that is not good progress. That is a further undermining of devolution. If the UK government was to approach the Internal Market Bill in the way that apparently today it has finally agreed not to implement illegality within that bill and to withdraw the clauses or indeed to support the amendments, for example, from people like Lord Hope, we might see some progress. I would like to see progress, but so far I'm afraid the Internal Market Bill is a big obstacle to that.
And Claire Baker.
Thank you. Last month at the Culture Committee, the Cabinet Secretary said that Scottish Enterprise would contact 500 businesses by the end of November. In the statement today, he also refers to 500 businesses. Is this a missed target, or are we still on course to contact commitment to 120
1,200 businesses, my apologies, being contacted by the end of the year.
Cabinet Secretary.
I understand that that is ongoing and that contact is still being undertaken, but what I will do is I will ask the Cabinet Secretary for Business and the enterprise companies to give an update of that to the member.
Thank you. That concludes questions on Brexit readiness. I thank members and the Cabinet Secretary as we managed to get through all the questions. In order not to waste time, I'm going to move straight on.